Hi, I'm Trish Jenkins, coordinator for Alaska Book Week, which runs the first full week in October. In this video, Nancy Lord, author, Alaska resident, and former state writer laureate, interviews Seth Kantner, whose new book is titled A Thousand Trails Home, Living with Caribou. Over to you, Nancy.
Okay. All right. Well, Seth, I'm going to hold up your book.
Well,
It's A Thousand Trails Home. The subtitle is Living with Caribou. And I reviewed this for the Anchorage Daily News a few weeks ago, and I said about it, among other things, I said, beautifully written and deeply introspective, A Thousand Trails Home, maybe the book Kantner has been aiming his powers at all along, a masterwork only he could deliver. And that was my honest opinion of this book. So I'm really happy today to be able to interview you, to have some conversation, some Q&A, and just so people know, at some point we're going to show some slides too from the book, which has dozens of excellent photos in it, your photos. So let's start with, for people who might not know you too well, you've had a really interesting life, and it's positioned you well to write about contemporary Alaska and the forces that are shaping it. So I'm wondering if you could give us a little of your biography, like, you know, where you were born, and where your family lived on the Kobuk, and then where you split your time these days, and also what you've been doing for the last month, because I understand you're just back to Kotzebue.
Thanks, Nancy. First of all, I was kind of laughing that you had a copy of the book, because everything is sort of messed up as far as getting that book delivered to the United States, and it's been caught on a barge for 6 weeks offshore, and my book tour is sort of crumbling, and so I'm laughing that you actually have a copy. I finally got one copy myself, and before I forget, I have a pretty small brain. It doesn't work too well, and I don't want to forget to thank you for that really amazing review you wrote in ADN, and also your comment about, maybe that was the book I've been working towards writing. I hadn't thought of it that way, so I appreciate your astuteness there. I was born along the Kobuk River in a small sod igloo that my parents had built with another couple that fall, probably about 14 feet across the floor, and dirt floor tunnel. These were white people interested in living the old ways, and so as a result, that was my beginning, I guess, and then everything was about the land. There wasn't much people stuff, so the land was the world, and nature was the world, and then caribou were the most important animal as far as clothing, furs for parkas, mucklucks, hides to sleep on, and then of course most meals. And then when there weren't caribou, we ate dried caribou. So and that went for my family, but obviously for the entire region, more or less, of Inupiaq culture.
Right, and you haven't left that behind. You still embrace that lifestyle.
Yeah, it's very complicated. There's a sometime in the 70s, the first phone came to the village 30 miles upriver from us, and now obviously we're all carrying our little phones and connected to all this crazy stuff, and somewhere in there, there's still caribou, this giant herd of caribou flowing through, and then flowing through our lives and important to our lives, but we're not wearing skins anymore, more or less, or by and large. And then there's a ton of outside food and resources and connections that make so we're not going to starve if we don't get caribou fat or caribou meat or caribou furs. And but that I do explore that connection we still have to the land, but also probably don't realize how much we need. And yeah. Anyway, so yeah, my modern life is a mix, and as all of ours are.
Okay. So I'm going to mention your other books because you've written a variety of them. Your breakout book was the novel Ordinary Wolves that won awards, got lots of attention. Then you did a memoir called Shopping for Porcupines in 2009. The novel was 2004. You wrote a children's book called Pup and Pokey in 2014, which is a lot of fun to read. And then essays, or what you call dispatches, in Swallowed by the Great Land in 2015. And now this book, 1,000 Trails Home, which is described as both memoir and natural history. So I'm wondering, first, whether you have a favorite among them, and then second, whether you see a pattern in the progression of your work.
Wow, Nancy, you should know me better than to expect me to ever see a pattern, especially in myself. Yeah, I definitely nauseate myself writing, sort of the same, this addiction to this region and the land and Eskimo culture and animals. I'm like, oh man, can I ever write about anything else? Actually, I do have a novel I wrote about a school shooter, and it's been languishing in one of the large publishers for years. Yeah, I don't see a progression. I never thought that I would move past Ordinary Wolves being my favorite book. I had no intention of writing more than one book when I wrote that. I only wanted to write one. And lately I've been thinking these weird thoughts that I'm so used to making my own stuff, whether it's tables or cabins or kayaks or sleds. I think I just made my own book. I mean, I don't think of myself as a writer. I just was, I wanted, this is the book I wanted. So that was Ordinary Wolves. And then in a way, I guess I'm kind of realizing maybe this caribou book, maybe because of what you said, maybe this caribou book is just what I wanted. And if somebody else would have written it, I would have been incredibly grateful.
Yeah. So, yeah, so I mean, that's great. So, yeah, I mean, you wrote the book you wanted to read, sort of in a sense that no one had written it, so you had to write it. But so I'm wondering, so I mean, you chose fiction initially, and then you've written nonfiction since then, pretty much. So is there more fiction in your future? And you just referenced a school shooter. So that's a novel that's been languishing?
Yeah, sadly enough, that's another thing that tires me about myself is I don't know if I ever really write fiction. So Ordinary Wolves I wrote as fiction, and I did glue stuff here and there to make a story, but part of the reason I wrote it as fiction was to because there's a bunch of truths I wanted to tell, and so if you're attaching such and such a incident to a real person's name, well, shoot, there's a lot of trouble you can get yourself into in a big hurry. So I gave myself the freedom of what I think of as writing a true story as fiction. I don't know if that makes any sense. The young adult novel I wrote when I was 15, my mom ended up with a brain tumor, and we ended up leaving the old sod house and going to Florida for 7 months, and I went to high school. And so that book is based on that. And so when it came time to decide whether it's fiction or nonfiction, obviously people wanted me to publish it as nonfiction, and I said, no, it's, there's a few things in there that aren't true. And I will not publish it as nonfiction, but sadly enough, it fell basically into the category of being almost true again, so I think that's a long-winded way of not answering your question. But you asked if there's fiction in my future, and I really want to write some fiction next. I'm feeling cramped, and I don't want to, I want to write some fiction.
Yeah. Okay. So another question that you have said or written on occasion that you don't really love writing and that it's very hard for you. And in the book, you described your boyhood self as, quote, dyslexic, late to read, terrible at handwriting and organization skills, and only vaguely interested in school subjects. So how did you end up writing so much and so well, and how do you keep doing it when it seems like you'd much rather be, out on the land hunting and fishing?
That's you got me there. I don't want to sound too touchy-feely, but I really give the land credit for my writing, because as far as your standard Americans pressured by career and finances and all that, I've been able to say, well, I don't want a career and I don't want a job, and I assume there's going to be caribou to eat and wood to cut for heat, and sort of the pressures of your standard money-based life. I have them, obviously, but I trusted the land to take care of me, and so then that made space in the form of just time to struggle with sentences, which I'm bad at that stuff, so it takes me a long time. One of the other things that may or may not make me a good writer is I'm horribly embarrassed at wasting anybody's time. So I don't want to waste anybody's time. So I spend my own time trying to make that writing as good as possible before they read it. And then I have this other filter where I just want it to be as true as possible. All my descriptions, I want true, as much as I can say that's true, even if it's in fiction. And that's a filter that I stops of, it takes a long time to stuff words through a really fine filter. And then, back to the land, not only providing for me while I'm spending a lot of time monkeying with words, then it's all the things I can gather from the land is what my stories are. So, my whole mentality is warped into this gathering. I can't drive down a road in Missoula without, if I see a naily board beside the road, I'm like, oh, do you know how much work it is to make a 2x4, even if it's got nails in it? And so gathering, once again, the photographs and the stories and the ideas from the land, all I'm doing is gathering. So.
Yeah, great. So I'm going to ask you one more question before we go to some photos, but I'm curious about your literary influences and or friendships, because I think you didn't necessarily read a lot when you were young, but I think your mother read to you. And I'm just wondering what reading or storytelling influenced you to kind of teach you how to do it. And what do you read particular writers or texts these days to inform your writing, and what contemporary writers might you admire?
So you asked me about 14 questions. I got this tiny brain that doesn't work too well. So my brother was very different than me and read much quicker, and he's 14 months older. And then there weren't very many books back along the Kobuk River in the late 60s and early 70s. So everybody read the same ones. But they could read in this amazing fashion that was silent. And frig, I couldn't get the hang of that. When I was started reading, all I could do was read aloud, which I'm sure was incredibly maddening for others. But when I finally learned to read silently, that was a great step. And then I've never been able to pick things out that are hard to. I need simple writing for me to get the hang of it. So Hardy Boys is. The more I read about dyslexia, is that there's something about your brain where you like predictability and you like to kind of know what's going to happen. And so Hardy Boys was perfect for my dyslexia, where it's got this pattern that you know kind of how it's going to be. It's a mystery, so you don't know what's going to happen, but your brain is able to follow that pattern. And so I got later on, like now, John Steinbeck is my hero, because he can get you into the story in just a sentence or two. To me, it's so clear. And then if you go to somebody like Shakespeare, I've never for a second been able to understand anything. Who's where? What are they doing? Who said what? I understand nothing ever. And so people that have influenced me have probably been the more accessible writers, I guess I should say. Definitely Margaret Atwood, like The Robber Bride. It's just so amazing in so many different ways. And Steinbeck, when I'm teaching classes, I like to give the students that not East of Eden, that's my favorite book, but The Pastures of Heaven. It's a tiny little book, easy to carry around, and it's stories about this valley in California and the crazy people, and very short, how they all fit together. And it totally reminded me of Life Along the Kobuk, but just so clearly written. That is why I give it to the students. I might be losing track of your question. Well, I definitely Louise Erdrich. I really liked, because she talked about natives. Love Medicine being the first one. I thought in a non-romantic, not just great writing, but just in non-romantic way. And there's more. They're slipping my mind right now. I do have to make a little bit of fun. When I was a kid, the one thing my brother and I couldn't stand reading about was Alaska. Oh Lord, who would ever want to read about Alaska? Anything, just don't make us read. So we had.
Why was that?
Well, we had plenty of Alaska.
Oh. But was it because a lot of it didn't seem real to you, or seemed?
Yeah, it never seemed real. It's a lot of maybe exaggeration and what do you call it, romanticizing and stuff. And then we just had, and I mean, if you take your standard developer in Alaska who wants to plow up the country and do whatever, the viewpoint is, oh, there's plenty of Alaska, let's plow some up. And so I think our viewpoint was kind of a reverse version of that. We just had plenty of, what's exciting about reading about a bear, So yeah, why not horses and cowboy anyway? So yeah.
Great. Okay. Well, since you mentioned teaching, just tell us what teaching you're doing.
I'm not doing any right now, and to answer your question, I'm not doing a very good job of writing either. And you said something about being out on the land. I'm kind of being more greedy with my time out, and pretty. I'm casting about the PC culture now really scares me. I'm not sure what you're allowed to say, and then who's going to get mad. And then our country seems pretty aggravated and ready and excited to get angry, and then I guess I'm, a lot of what I say, I don't trust anybody wants to hear it or that it's going to really help the world as much as maybe a new app for your iPhone. So there I am deciding whether I should encourage people to tan skins or, and then I'm like, oh, who's doing that? That's kind of stupid. And so it's almost easier for me to step back from it, which I don't think is helping my brain. I need to get back into more writing, but to answer your question, yeah, that's what I've been doing is spending more time not photography and not writing, just sort of more time out.
Okay. Well, I have more questions, sort of more specific to the book, and maybe some harder questions.
Yeah.
But let's look at some photos, because you are a wildlife photographer as well as a writer, and I noticed on your website even that you actually say you're a photographer, that you kind of list that before you list writer. And so I guess my question is, how you balance those interests, because they both take a lot of time and effort, and maybe you could address that a little bit, and then we'll go and show some of the photos from your book. Yeah.
So I don't think of myself foremost as a photographer. I definitely don't. Foremost, I'm a gatherer and I can't help myself with that. I don't always say hunting because I don't actually like killing things. I really like getting a caribou and the whole process, and certainly crawling around on tundra and then shooting it and skinning it and taking care of the meat and stuff. But I never want to put that large emphasis on pulling the trigger, which the word hunting seems to. As far as making a living, it's not from books, it's from commercial fishing for salmon. And so sometimes that comes up first in that list. And then I put a crazy amount of fanatic Wolverine boy energy into photography for 30 years or so. I was just relentless. And I've really backed off on that. And to a large extent, that's because of computers, because I used to shoot film and now everything goes through the computer, and I can't stand the way life goes through the computer. And I don't even know how to download my photos off my camera. So I joke that I have a picture of, thousands of caribou, and then I'm out watching a bear having sex with a moose, and I'd have to delete the picture of the thousands of caribou while I'm freezing out there. So I have room to get the, it's just a joke that I never download the pictures. I just delete more and more to make room for the next ones. And so the digital world has really slowed me up as far as pictures. I just am not the person to deal with the digital part of it. But I still do it, and I still, it's just, there's a real big difference amount of horsepower I have for photography anymore. Writing, there's so many things I want to say, but I live in a culture place that's there's a lot of racial pitfalls that are in history and whatever is all taking place with our country right now. And so my impulse is to come up with a humorous book, but about how crazy humans are here. But of course, who knows? Maybe that would be the end of my career.
All right. Well, let's look at some of your photos. So I'm going to share screen, and you'll talk us through them. Okay, give me a thumbs up if you're seeing that.
I'm seeing it, Nancy.
Okay.
I don't know about
Okay.
the people out there in the world, but I probably threw this one in just to in some ways show the vastness of the land. And then I've spent so much of my life where you come out of a small house or tent and you start looking for what's moving on the land. I always like to joke that the local native culture and viewpoint, which I was totally indoctrinated in, is that there's no tourism. You're looking for something. And so you can look around here and say, I don't see any tracks. I don't see any wood. I don't see a twig big enough to clean my rifle barrel. And sort of maybe not see the just crazy beauty of the country. Just you're looking for food. You can give me another slide. I can't remember the order of these, but I guess this was another example. This is a fox, and in a sense, he's doing the same thing. He or she's doing the same thing. Searching a big country, in this case, the sea ice for food, and smells are certainly not that interested in the scenery.
Wow. Next.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this is only a few miles from Kotzebue, and I have all sorts of things to say about climate change and cultural change, and so to a certain extent, lately the migration is kind of disrupted and uncertain, and the herd is shrank to have roughly half the size, and so a lot of these falls, the caribou herds migrating later, which throws in all sorts of disruption in hunting practices and the mount hunted, and whether it's bulls instead of cows, or cows instead of bulls. And so I go into a lot of that in my book, but then something like this, I really want my book to not just speak to Alaskans, but to the world, and say, this kind of huge group of migratory animals is sort of the epitome of our planet and where we're at, and what we do next, as far as whether we protect this herd and mend our ways, I guess. Yeah, you can give me another slide there, Nancy, please. Yeah, so this is early in the book, and this is not my photo. This is Don Williams's photo from Ambler, but that's our sod igloo, sort of near the top of the photo, a little bit to the right, and then the cache and the caribou hides hanging in fall time, and back then just so much emphasis on what the land was doing, and most of my life's been that way. What's the weather every day? What are you going to do? Depends on the weather and the animals and the season. So this life that I live now still is just everything's tied to every season and the change of the seasons. That's the Kobuk River in the fall, and it's a crazy thing that in the modern world we got all this stuff, and so we just bounce from what we think of as normal to suddenly scarcity, and COVID's been probably pretty good for us in a microscopic way as far as that goes, because I grew up with caribou just sort of like gosh, I can't think of an example for the States, but just lower 48 viewpoint, but they just kind of were always, coming through, and if you wanted caribou, you just kind of, oh, well, maybe I'll get a caribou today. Oh, no, it looks like, if I want to sit by the fire and finish my book, I'll get a caribou tomorrow. And just this, I'm just so aware now of how, I'll just say it, spoiled we've been. Not only the huge amount of animals here in the past decades, but then the fact that we have a whole bunch of new technology to carry our softening bodies over the tundra to get these animals. So spoilage is something that I'm really aware of, or you could look at it from another viewpoint, just how lucky we are, and maybe not doing a real good job of noticing. I spent a lot more time with animals than people. When I was a kid, we would if we saw another person, we'd run back, tell my parents. It was pretty exciting, travelers, they were called back then. Travelers are coming, and that was people. But the rest of the time it was, the companions were what was going on out in nature. And so I think that's given me a pretty warped viewpoint. I'm just I look at nature, I thought in a normal way, but I'm realizing that maybe it's a little abnormal. This is the country behind where I grew up, and the caribou trails are everywhere you go in the tundra, and easier to see, I guess, maybe on the slatey, rocky surfaces, but almost more impressive on the tundra, just veining the land forever, these old and new caribou trails. And I guess that's where my title came from, and somewhere along the line, I haven't talked about this in this conversation, but I started this book with no idea what I was going to say or what I could say or what I wanted to say. And so it took about 8 years of just bashing through the willows of words to try to figure out how I felt and what I wanted to say. This wolf I ran into out on the sea ice. Of course, my camera wasn't working. It was too cold, and I got a few pictures, but hadn't ever seen one that far out on the ice before. And I don't know. I've sort of backed away from trapping. I never did trap wolves. My dad didn't like killing them. He would once in a while, but yeah, it's been an interesting life coming from that such focus on getting. I always joke that when we were a kid, we ate everything that moved, whether it was seagull eggs or loons or whatever. And so I guess once again, it's just part of my weird perspective that I put into these books. Yeah, I don't know. That might be our last slide. I lost track of what I sent to you.
What do you want to say about this one? Where is
Yeah,
this?
it was just there are more slides. Yeah, it's I guess this slide really kind of covers a lot of what I talk about, just the aluminum boats and the change mix of so much modern stuff, and then this still this emphasis on the animals and the food. I think it's really important that we stop a lot of the rhetoric, and I'll just say backwards looking, and say, where we're at now and how much that's changed. We can still value caribou equally, but we're not going to starve if we don't get them. And but we might, our souls might starve without that connection to the land. And that I'm going to keep writing about that probably as long as I write. Is just what makes up our connection to the land, and then also how sloppy a lot of us have become about noticing the importance of those connections. Okay, I'm going to assume that is my last slide.
Okay. And
Oh, shoot.
no, it's not.
Yeah, I apologize.
Sure.
I'm not used to Zoom or computers, and it's pretty terrifying to now with COVID. I think a lot of my book stuff is going to be so-called virtual, and it's terrifying. But this is my you need to back up there for a second, Nancy. If that works with the buttons you can press there. What I was going to say about that caribou in the ice was that was my childhood TV. I didn't have that stuff, and you step outside, and springtime, caribou would cross thousands right in front of the house where I was born and raised, and they're struggling with the ice, and it's just such an amazing thing how caribou survive and what they put up with and keep putting up with moment after moment of their lives. And boy, that's just hard to convey how what amazing life it is for them out there. And your next slide that you click to there is the aggregation that if you can get it to go to the next slide. So this herd divides up into large and small groups and migrates around the country or around the Northwest Arctic here. But then in early July, largely because of mosquitoes and botflies and insect harassment, they gather together, and conceivably there's a whole nother thing they're doing for a reason for gathering that we don't understand. Maybe they all want to see each other. But they gather in close proximity in groups of 40, 50, 80, 100,000 caribou in small group or in a small area, and almost pressed together their bodies at times. And a certain amount of that is to cut down on insect harassment. But it's once again a wonder of the natural world to see.
So Seth, is this one taken from
That's taken
a
from an
mountainside, or were you up in
that's
the
taken from an airplane.
airplane?
A friend of mine was kind enough to take the door off his plane, and I was taking pictures. I didn't realize that the seat belt didn't work, and it was I'm somewhat grateful not to have fallen out, because I noticed partway through that my seatbelt was not there, and then I noticed that my seatbelt was pressed up against the outside of the plane because it had flopped out. And then, of course, the 206 is moving at good speed, and yeah, really exciting. I'd never seen that here. It's a big country with no roads, and my family, by and large, stayed completely at home. My dad always believed the best hunting was staying right at home. And so, and this was probably 10 years ago I took this photo, but I had never seen the aggregation, the summer aggregation, until then. I'd heard about it, but my whole life it had been, hundreds of miles away over the mountains, and that was that. So yeah, pretty amazing opportunity. And then if you're thinking about life, you're also thinking about the fact that you're wasting jet or airplane fuel and not making the herd any happier flying around them like a big insect and all that. But I have to sort all that out in my own brain, I guess.
Okay, we now are done with those photos. Thank you. They're just fabulous. Yeah, I have some maybe harder questions. But yeah, two of those themes, if we can use that word, in the book, one has to do with hunting and one has to do with climate change, at least as I've picked them out. And you've addressed this a little bit already regarding hunting, but your father set an example for you by, hunting on foot and taking single shots. And then you've described in the book how that changed for local people when they could use semi-automatic rifles and then snow machines and were actually chasing herds. And you're critical of those practices, especially when it leads to waste. And yet, you're in that position, you don't want to criticize your friends and neighbors. So I'm wondering how you managed to write that part of the book to be both honest about it and then also respectful of, other people, hunters.
Lots of time, lots of tearful gray hair and stress. I tend to write stuff like that and then just keep going back to the truth is the best filter, because, you know, you don't want to jump on anybody and be unfair. I guess one of the other things that I found is examining myself is maybe the safest route through that, because there's hardly any practices that I don't admire, that I haven't participated in, you know, whether it's chasing caribou or wounding an animal accidentally or owning an AR-15 or whatever, you know, or flying from an airplane to get a photo of a herd that doesn't need you to be flying over it. And so I tend to often bounce back to describing my feelings about myself when I do things I'm not that impressed with afterwards, or after thinking about a little. But yeah, those are very, very tough, what you just asked, because I don't want to write a touchy-feely book. I don't want to write a native worshiping book that says, you know, like basically everything the natives do here is stewardship, and everything the white people do is bad. You know, I don't want to do that. It's a waste of time. It's not true. So I have to proceed one foot at a time, carefully. I also want to keep living here and not, you know, get everybody worked up. And so at points, I told my editor, Kate at Mountaineers Press, you don't understand. This is like, you know, you're asking me to write about Black people having abortions or something, you know, that's just with guns, or I don't even know, you know, just all these modern touchy issues that at that point I sensed that she had you know, in Seattle, didn't quite understand how politically charged some of these issues are here, caribou, and what you're allowed to hunt them with, and what, you know, which guns are being used, and how people feel about, there's a big demarcation here between so-called subsistence and so-called sport hunting. And definitely locally sport hunters are very well hated. But, you know, I want to say, like, well, if you look at some of our practices, us being local, we've kind of slid over in that direction a little ourselves. On and on and on. I could go on and on. It's all kind of a minefield, as a lot of issues are nowadays. But I think worth doing, I guess. I mean, we have to, if we want to have caribou, we got to wake up and figure out what we're doing. Yeah.
So, yeah, just to follow up on that, I'm wondering at what point you decided to sort of implicate yourself. I mean, you talk about, you know, buying one of those new rifles, and then you talk about participating in a hunt, and then kind of feeling, you know, associating yourself with that. And I'm just wondering, yeah, how, you know, if that was sort of part of your original idea, or you kind of worked that in later, or and what you think that accomplished for the book.
Well, you give me way too much credit. I don't really, I'm not good at organizing stuff or even understanding the reason why I write something. I do. And then often maybe it'd be somebody like Kate at Mountaineers who tells me that, you know, this does this for your story. And I'm like, oh, really? Thanks. I didn't know that. So I'm sadly very lacking in some of that big picture type of mental powers, which I don't have. But me showing myself, well, first of all, I've never been part of a community. I grew up out there on the land, and I've just never been part of a community. So in some sense, I guess, I hate to say this, but I don't really have that much to lose. I just I'm saying it like it is. And Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I'm explaining that well, but so me describing myself as a bounty hunter out on the ice shooting baby caribou for fishing game. I mean, I could see a person saying, well, we should have left that, let that stay out on the ice. But I can't really get comfortable criticizing others' actions if I'm sort of hiding my own, I guess. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, maybe you could tell us a little more about that, because you said bounty hunter and you weren't serious about that, but maybe, I mean, what was it that you did for Fish and Game as part of a study that, because that's an interesting episode in the book.
Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on your perspective. And looking at it now, I was a bounty hunter. I was shooting baby caribou for $100 a piece, just to see how, and, a limited amount, 10 per spring and fall for probably 2 springs and 2 falls. But the idea there was to basically analyze their fat and growth and weight and how they were doing to predict the crash of the herd. So the idea was that this herd's so-called too big and it's going to crash, and it'd really be nice to know to predict that. Of course, shucks, ironically, the concept of shooting baby caribou to predict the crash of the herd is just where do you go with that? So sort of kind of messed up. I don't know. So in a way, I feel really good about including that in the book, because once again, I'm not trying to say who's right or wrong. It's just sort of kind of a big crazy mess. Humans managing nature or trying to.
Yeah. So you mentioned response from your editor in Seattle, and can you talk a little more about that? Were you getting messages that you were, I don't know, what was that message about, showing the reality of hunting?
Well, to bounce back to Ordinary Wolves, it took me 10 years or so to write that, and none of the New York houses wanted it. It was maybe a little too rough of a version of Alaska. This was in around 2000, I guess. And then Milkweed bought it, and Emily Buchwald had started Milkweed, and she was the editor, and she was hugely important to me in saying, like, this is my computer just said my internet connection's unstable, but maybe you can still see me. But Emily was hugely important in saying, this is what you need to do to make this into a book. This works and this doesn't work. And I didn't know those things. And so as far as this caribou book, Kate Rogers, Mountaineers editor, we argue this point. I claim she asked me to write it. She claims that I asked her if I could write it. So I'm going to stick with my version of reality, which is that she asked me. But so I started it, and she would maybe once or twice a year would look at what I'd written, and after the first maybe 2 years, she was like, Seth, you're holding the reader at arm's length, and you're protecting yourself from the reader, and we're not there, she's totally right. Totally essential to the progress. Painful to hear, you're a writer and you send something to an editor, you want them to be like, wow, this is so perfect, so amazing, and don't change a word, and you're done, and you can go on and do something else. So I mean, there's just no question anywhere that this book would not have happened with Kate, whether or not she's going to admit that she asked me to write it, without her guiding me through it, wouldn't have happened. And she was able to, one thing, for example, she was telling me that the time element, she wanted me to relax and have that be real fluid. And so you'll notice that you go through the book and it kind of comes and goes with the years. It doesn't just start way back when and go to, present day. And in the end, I really liked, tempted to say how she wrote it, allegedly. But anyway, I liked how her steerage, And when it came to the photos, we fought horribly for a while there, as far as which ones where and all that. And I think at times can be part of the process. I'm only going to say one more thing here and then keep quiet, but mixing so much, the contract said 20,000 words and it's 70,000. And then mixing that with photos, it's just so hard. And then not wanting to get anything wrong as far as like when the USS Corwin was refitted and the little is incredibly maddening and incredible amount of work trying to put it all together. So.
Yeah. Okay. There's a
and now it's
and
then now it's lost on a barge off of Washington State.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you what kind of response you've had to the book yet, but I can't because no one's got it apparently. But I did get an advance copy. But before we wind up, I do want to ask you about about what you've written about climate change, because you obviously are in such close touch with your environment up there, and you've been observing climate change over the years, and it kind of infiltrates all of your writing, I think. But I'm just sort of wondering what you felt, if you felt an obligation as a writer to tell the world about the climate and the issues that it's causing. And you said you're not, you're not really a political person, but where are you on that sort of spectrum of,
Well, yeah, first of all, climate change. Yeah, first of all, climate change should never be a political thing. It's like Hurricane Katrina coming towards you and then calling it politics. It's so climate change, I guess you just made me realize this in the last 50 or 60 seconds, is that first of all, this Northwest Alaska here is supposed to be the ground zero for climate change on Earth. So we have been getting the most of it for quite a long time. And then what you made me realize, I guess, is the fact that, I grew up in this way with the animals as my friends and the land as my store, sort of each one of those things exponentially compounded watching the world change as it has here so fast, the thin ice and no ice and rain in the winter and collapsing cut banks and tundra, and it just goes on and on and on. And then the newest thing is that sort of equaling the caribou suddenly becoming incredibly unpredictable. Yeah, I feel, at times I feel like if I'm not writing about climate change, I'm shouldn't even be writing. It feels such a huge thing to me. And so mixed in there is connection to the land, which is that we're all connected to the land and we're all connected equally. And some of us are more aware of it, and some of us are worried about our 400-foot yacht, but or whatever. I think all that stuff is coming towards all of us equally, whether it's basically, if we ignore climate change and we ignore who we are as organisms that are connected to the earth, and it's not going to go well. So yeah, I doubt if I could even write a humorous book about, local craziness here and not have climate change just all throughout. I can't imagine not writing about the biggest storm coming. Yeah. So.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, so I guess to end here, I just want to ask what's next for you. I think you're supposed to be off on a book tour, but as you said, there's a problem with the books being stuck on ships somewhere. So yeah, what are your plans for this winter? And do you have another project, either, book or otherwise, that you're headed into?
Yeah, so I just came down from upriver. You asked probably at the very beginning of this at where I'm living and dividing my time, and so I've been spending spring and fall at Earl Place up along the Caribout. I had to come down a few days ago to try to beat the ice, so I didn't get caught up there before this alleged book tour, and then now I'm hearing from the village that thousands of caribou are crossing after a long fall of us all staring at empty tundra. So it's really hard for me. I'm like a loose dog. I can't think straight at this point. All I can smell is caribou. But I'm supposed to be concentrating for the foreseeable future on getting this book out there, and interviews like this, and that makes it even harder for me to think about writing something else, because it's sort of all consuming for a while, as you well know, when a book comes out. And wow, good question. I'm fighting with what to write next, and I also really want to find a magazine or newspaper, someplace to contribute to regularly, because I'm noticing that not having that back pressure of a deadline and somebody wanting something makes me just focus on scraping skins or making coffee or playing with my phone or something. So or reading other people's writing, which is really nice. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Seth. Thank you so much for this. It was really a pleasure. I felt like I learned a lot from you. And I think other people are really going to enjoy this interview. So have a great, whatever your year of book tour and book promotion amounts to. And good luck, very good luck with the book. Hope it does well for you.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to say?
Sorry. Yeah, are you still in Homer?
Yeah.
Okay, good. I hope to get down there. We'll see what happens. I'm trying not to be a bad COVID person, but at the same time, would like to go some places and talk about my book. Hopefully, not all on computer. And so, yeah, thanks, and thanks so much for your abilities with that review you wrote. Gosh, I would have been terrified to have to write a review, and you seem to have been really able to follow what I was trying to say.
Okay, well, thank you. Okay, so
Yep.
yeah, come down to Homer. Well, just stay in touch.
Okay.
So
Sounds good.
Trish, we'll turn it back to you to send us off.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much for this wonderful interview, and thank you for being part of Alaska Book Week 2021.
Thank you, Trish.
Yeah, thank you.